Hey friends, this is Sketch Dirt and I'm Marla. I'm so glad you're here. Today we are drawing dice. Okay, so to get started, I just wanted to talk a little bit about why I picked dice for today's video and what I feel like you can get out of drawing this object. I think like whether you're a beginning artist just learning to draw, or if you're a more advanced artist like looking for warm-up techniques, this is a great object to just basically focus and practice like very like advanced techniques, but in like a very simple, focused way. And so let's start by just comparing a dice with like a regular cube. And as you can see with like the regular cube shape, like it's just basically squares. And then with the dice, in order to make it look like this shape, you have to round the edges and you have to round the corners. And then of course there's like the dots and the perspective involved with drawing the dots correctly, and then just the shading in general, and basically taking a 3D object and putting it on two-dimensional paper. And as an artist, this is something that you are going to be constantly trying to learn new techniques to do, like take very three-dimensional objects and just things out in the world, like life in general, and then how do you put that on two-dimensional paper and then just capture that and capture the ideas in your mind the way you want them to look. And so that's why I chose dice for today's video. I think you can basically take that from this very simple object and begin that, like learn how to draw that and then apply those techniques to your own ideas and your own work. So let's take that and let's start drawing. So I've started off by drawing 3 cubes on a piece of paper here. I've actually done a video on how to draw cubes, and I'm going to put that link in the description box down below. To get started from there, I've taken an HB pencil and I'm just rounding the corners all around the cubes to get started on that dice shape. The reason why I started out by just drawing straight cubes with the sharp edges and corners is because this gives you just kind of a good sense of the dimension and how big you want the shapes to be, and then also like what the sides are and what the actual edges are. It kind of puts it all in your mind for how you want to go forward with your drawing. So to get started, I'm still taking that HB pencil and I'm going to start shading in the side of the first dice. Since the light is coming in from the left side is going to be the lightest shading, the top is going to be the medium shading, and then the right side that I'm shading here is going to be the darkest shading. I'm being really careful not to get too dark with the shading or anything. I still want this to look very light. I want it to look like a white dice, and I just want the shadows to show up and the dimensions. So I want to have a lot of control over how dark it gets, and I'm going to be building it up as I go along. So there's also that. I'm not going to go too crazy with getting too dark right off the bat, because I'm going to be building it up as the drawing goes along. And then by just kind of controlling how dark things are and how light things are in the beginning and just building up as I go along, then I have kind of a sense of how I want to shade the other cubes and the other dice shape. Then they can all be relatively the same looking and kind of very even looking in terms of shading. So for this dice that's like straight on, even though it's a white dice, I'm still putting in some shading on the front to help give it dimension and to help it like pop and stand out on the sheet of paper. And then with this last dice, this does like, it is a little further back than the rest of the shapes, and so I'm shading it a little darker. Not too much darker, not extreme, but enough to just give perspective, give a sense of composition to the entire piece. And as you can see, when I shade the edges, they're supposed to look very rounded, very soft, and so I'm not shading up into like the edge of the piece. I'm kind of holding back a little bit and leaving some white area, and then on the edges where it's the darkest, I'm very softly shading that in very evenly. It isn't a crisp line, and I'm just kind of doing that all around the dice shape. Again, kind of keeping control over how dark it gets by still taking this HB pencil, and just building up another layer of color. I could have taken a 2B pencil, a darker pencil, and just gone in there with this kind of level of shading right from the start, but then I kind of lose control over that shading buildup. That's what I want control over, because I still want these, again, to look like white dice. And as you can see, when I kind of outline the shape itself, like I don't go through and just put a hard line around it. Like if I did that, it would have a different look. It wouldn't necessarily look drawn and sketchy the way I want it to look. It would look a bit more graphic, and it would have a bit more pop to it. And so for your drawings, it just depends on what style you want to draw. For mine, I want this to look very sketched out, very drawn, and very kind of like, I still want it to have a very hand element to it. So I'm going through here, again, really soft edges to give it that rounded look. And the shading is very even in like the way that I'm shading, but it's also kind of uneven in order to kind of add to that softness and kind of that sketched out style for this drawing. And as you can see, I'm putting in some dark like shadows around the edges, because that's the way the light is going to catch it. That's just one of those elements that you put in that helps and adds dimension. So I have taken the 2B pencil now, and I'm starting to draw in the dots. That's one thing I want to say. It's best to not put the dots in like right away, because when I was practicing, when I was doing this, I put the dots in right away to start out, and either they weren't placed correctly, or they were not exactly the same size, or it just messed up the shading for the rest of the whole dice shape. It just works better if you get that shape down and you get the shading in on all the sides, and then you put the circles in. And even then, you don't shade them in right away. You just want to get down the size and the placement, and then we're going to go in and shade them and build up the darkness on the shading, so you have control of that as well. So now I've taken I'm still taking my 2B pencil, and because these dots aren't flat, they're kind of like embedded into the dice. They have angles to them on the side, and I'm kind of putting in this first layer of shading, because then I'm going to go through and put the angles in on the dots. And for your shape, for your drawing, you could keep these dots flat looking. It wouldn't really matter. I wanted to put the angles in because I felt like it added just a little bit more dimension to the shape, and just helped it pop on my drawing overall. And I'm just going through, adding a little bit more shading. Again, this is kind of where I see when I'm looking at this overall, I'm just kind of adding shading in where I'm just like seeing where this could use a little bit more pop and a little bit more dimension. And this is just something like with your drawings, you kind of like feel it out, and you kind of put these layers and these elements in as you go. And definitely you should experiment. You shouldn't be afraid that you're going to mess up your whole drawing if you kind of like go outside of what's in your head or what you want to do, because really like holding yourself back is what kind of keeps your drawing from looking the way you want it to look in your mind. Like taking that extra step and experimenting is really how you get closer to putting on paper what's inside of your head. And just doing this over and over again, it should be fun. You should be having like a lot of fun with your drawings. So as I said before, I'm putting in those edges. I'm not shading over the whole thing, still building up the layers, because what I want is that really dark dot shape to show up really well, but I don't want to feel like I'm scribbling with the pencil. I want it to be really smooth. I don't want it to be patchy. I've picked up my 6B pencil now, and now I'm able to do that. I'm able to just shade it in very smoothly. I don't have to press super hard. I can just get like a very even, solid tone and shading as I go along, because I've kind of built that up as I went along. And plus you have a lot more control. Like if you have to just like scribble to like get that shading as dark as you want it, then there's a much higher chance that you're going to kind of like go outside the lines or mess up a bit. And with something that's supposed to be this precise, it looks really off if you've kind of like gone outside of the classic shape. Like most drawings, that adds to it, if it adds character, like if you've kind of gone like outside the shape, like it adds to what it's supposed to be. But with something like this one, it's so precise and kind of so technical, you definitely want that control and want to be able to just have a sense of where your drawing is going, just like very slowly as you're like building up the shades and the drawing as you go along. So I've still got that 6B pencil, and as you can see, I'm kind of emphasizing the edges. I'm not putting in hard lines, working to keep it really soft and kind of just build up that shading for the purpose of adding dimension to the piece. So I'm adding shadows and shading strictly for like that sense of dimension to make it pop on the paper. And depending on what your drawing is, you may want your drawing to look a bit more flat. Like there's nothing wrong with that either. You may get to where you're just like, I like the way this looks, and then you stop there. Or you can keep going. So what I've done now is I've taken an HB pencil and I'm just putting in a little bit of shadow. So that way there's a sense of where it's at on the paper. You don't have to do this with your drawing, but I like to do this just to give a sense of like how it's sitting on the paper. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing to my channel. This is Sketch Dirt, and I'm Marla. Bye.